Welcome to Truth and Tribe. I'm your host, Mike Sorelli. We've got Eddie Gallagher here with us today. But before we get into it, again, this episode is called After Action Review, which we often call the AAR in the military. This is going to be part one. But before we get to that, let's go with the hard truth. Sort of a mad minute. Have fun with this. What book are you currently reading? And let me caveat that for Eddie. You can't say your own book.
The book that I just finished was Tribe.
By Sebastian Junger. That I think that should be a must read for every veteran getting out of the military. What's your most favorite podcast?
Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan.
That's the one I listen to now more than anything. Yeah.
I think he's set the bar for all future.
Yeah, just he has on different guests, and I like how he doesn't push a certain side. He just has a conversation, and the truth comes out.
Yeah. I think more so than much of our media, he sticks to journalistic principles of objectivity and impartialness. Are you going on? Have you?
No, not. I haven't. I'm gonna. If that happens, it'll happen organically.
Got it. So I know you're into to fitness. What does your workout and diet program look like right now?
Right now, so I've done this pretty much my whole career is intermittent fasting. I don't eat until noon, but I work out. So I get up and have a little bit of coffee, usually run 6 miles in the morning, and then later on in the afternoon, I'll do a kettlebell or some kind of weight heavy HIIT workout in my garage. I try to get in 2 a days.
6 miles a day after what you've been through. Okay. I just had a hip replacement, so that that ain't happening. How much sleep do you get a night?
Now, I try and get around 7 to 8 hours. I got you heard of the Whoop strap?
Yes. So, gaining in popularity.
Yeah. So I got that last year, and it's been a game changer. It's it tells me how much sleep I'm getting, and then it also lets you know if you drink or if you do anything. I mean, it diminishes your recovery, so it keeps you pretty much on the straight and narrow. So it's pretty awesome. I'm
going to have to pick one of those up. I've heard a lot of good things. What app do you utilize the most on your cell phone?
Embarrassing enough, it's Instagram. Yeah.
One of the prior guests who you may know, Dan Luna, actually said the same thing. And I will tell you the same thing I told him. That's embarrassing for the teams.
Yeah.
Favorite song?
Favorite song is, dude, that's a tough one.
What was the song you listened to on the helicopter or in the MRAPs heading into a mission? Which I know you're not supposed to do, but we all do.
Yeah. It's, what the heck's the name of that Irish band?
Flogging Molly?
No, it's one you don't hear about, but it's Last of the Mohicans.
The Kiss.
Pipes and Pints.
Okay.
It's the Last of the Mohicans theme, but it's with bagpipes. It's pretty badass.
That is the popular answer right now. 2 for 2. What's your favorite movie?
Oh, damn. Dude, I'm a big movie buff, but one that I can watch all the time is Platoon.
Platoon.
Yeah.
Barnes and what was the
Elias.
Elias.
Yeah. Good and Evil.
What's your biggest pet peeve? What really sets you off?
Well, what's been setting me off lately is people social manners, so on planes, we talked about yesterday.
So I agree with you on behaviors, and I know I've seen some studies that social behaviors have declined because of COVID.
Yeah,
and being everyone being remote. My biggest pet peeve is just disrespect.
Yep, so because that is a form of disrespect. Is looking out for yourself only. You're not respecting the people around you. And what they're going through, and I think that irritates me.
I always wildly respect. You watch that young Marine or soldier interact with people. It's always yes, sir, yes, ma'am, representing the organization. Makes me proud. Your most embarrassing moment in public?
Actually, I got this one's not in public, but so when I was locked up, we came back from breakfast one morning. And so when you come back, you have to go stand by your cell, and they buzz you in. You're only allowed in your cell for 5 minutes, and you have to go back out into general population. to go to the bathroom pretty much. And I had the bug or something, and so I'm waiting for them to buzz me in my cell. And I mean, dude, I had to go bad. And I barely made it in, dude, and I ended up a little bit came out in my pants, right? But that was the worst part was I had no other pants to change into because the laundry had just come. We only allowed 2 pairs of pants, so I'm banging on my window, my cell window, and there's another prisoner out there, and I was like, dude, do you got an extra pair of pants? And out loud, he's like, did you shit yourself? And I'm like, yeah. And so everybody in there knew, but it's one of those things.
It has happened to the best of men.
Yeah.
Who is the most influential mentor you've ever had?
My dad.
Dad.
Yeah.
I'd have to agree. Best leader you ever worked for?
I'd have to say, we were talking about him earlier. He was a officer that I had, just phenomenal prior enlisted officer, but he knew his role as an officer, to look up and out, and then he also took care of the boys at all times. So, and he always had good advice. So yeah, I think that'd probably be the best leader that I knew.
That's good to hear. If you could go back and talk to your 20-year-old self, what would you tell yourself?
Strap in. It's going to be a ride. That's a hard question going back and, what would you tell your younger self? Because I think a lot of decisions I made, when I was young is because I didn't know. I didn't have any idea what was coming up ahead, and I just was, charging ahead, pretty much doing what I wanted to do. I think if I went back now and told myself some advice or, the things that I would go through, I don't know if that would change my mind or not, but I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't give back my 20 years for anything.
I respect that. Some things have to be learned along the way.
Yeah.
For all those everyday warriors listening, trying to learn, what are a few pieces of advice you would give them on how to live a more purpose-driven, fulfilling life?
Well, I'd say the first thing is, and this is what I would tell my platoons, the biggest character that I want to see out of them is humility. Remain humble at all times, no matter what you're going through. Even if you're on top and you're crushing it, like, you don't need to let everybody know that you're doing that. You just remain humble and keep doing what you're doing. Or if you're on the opposite end, if you're getting critiqued or if you did something wrong and somebody's pointing it out, take that criticism on without letting your ego get in the way. And that's how you're going to move forward. I think ego sets all of us back a lot, because we all have ego. I have it, and it's one of those things where you can only take so much criticism, or especially from people that you might not know. But I would say to step back and just evaluate yourself before you start arguing on what someone said about you.
For those that are listening, you and I never really served together, but we did go through a portion of training together. And as I was thinking back, the one thing I remembered about you is you were a team player. You didn't seek to be known, or you were not the loudest person in the room. In fact, you were one of the quietest. You were always apt to help the team, and you were humble. And do you think humility is your top trait?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's the one trait that I've always tried to maintain, and then I try to get other people. If I'm in charge of a platoon or whatever, that I want them to have that trait.
How do you respond to people that don't have humility?
That's when guys don't have humility, or it's just one of those things. I don't say anything to them. It's just like, hey, if you think you're, the biggest badass in the room and you're letting everybody know it, eventually you're going to make a mistake. And this is the thing, when you don't remain humble and you do make a mistake, people are going to come after you because you've been talking trash the whole time. You can look at Conor McGregor that's like my favorite fighter, right? But unfortunately what happened this last fight, and he is getting crucified right now, like all over media, because he's not the most humble person, and he ran his mouth all the way up, and you're just leaving yourself to be exposed if you do make a mistake.
I'd be interested to know what is the ratio between showmanship and humility there, though. I mean,
there's definitely some of that for sure. He's a businessman, and the showmanship he does to make money, but at the same time, there's a price that comes with that.
Absolutely. The more you put yourself out there, the more you open yourself up to criticism. But that lends to the man in the arena, which we will get to. So that was the hard truth. Eddie, thanks for playing that one. One, thank you for coming on today.
No, thanks for having me.
And I'm just a small guy in the podcast game, but hey, you got to start somewhere, and we just kick this off. But I wanted to approach this differently from a point of reflection that we all learned, dude. Because as we talked outside of this podcast, man, I just every day I'm looking back at my career and not focusing on the things that I did well. I did some things well, but more focusing on the things I didn't do well and what I would have done differently. Not that I can go back and change those things, but hopefully prevent myself from making the same mistake.
Yep.
I assure you here, we are not going to have the gotcha moment that I know some of the podcast hosts are trying to bait you into. The verdict was rendered. It's over.
Yeah.
That's done. So as per the intro, I want to learn from this. Let's start. And in this first episode, I really just want to get to the context of what happened. I also want to know about your career in the SEAL teams, about your mentors coming up, how you ended on your leadership philosophies. You took over the senior enlisted advisor position, which we call the platoon chief of a SEAL team. But let's go a little into your background, where you came from, what led you to the SEAL teams.
Sure. So I grew up a military brat. My dad was a West Point officer, and so we moved around every 2 years. I grew up most of my childhood in Asia, Korea, China, Japan, and we would bounce back and forth every 2 years back to D.C., where my dad worked at the Pentagon for 2 years, and then go back to whatever country we were sent to. And it wasn't until my high school years is when he got out. So we ended up moving to Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I wasn't the best student. I had a lot of, I think, anger from moving around all the time, having to make new friends, leave them, then make new friends. So, and I always did, I made friends everywhere I went, but they were the rowdy bunch. And I somehow gravitated towards that because they were the most loyal bunch as well. They would, if something happened, they had your back no matter what. But high school was sort of, a blur. I barely made it through. I tried a year of college after that and realized that wasn't for me at the time. And I was going nowhere pretty much. I was just working odd jobs. And I think because of my dad's service and pretty much every male in my family are all officers. They all went to Annapolis or West Point. And so I think I gravitated towards the service because of that. So one day I was like, I'm out of here. I just went to the Navy recruiting office, walked in, and was like, I want to join. No plan, didn't talk to anybody, which I sort of wish I did now. But went in there, was like, hey, I want to join. He asked me what I wanted to do, and I had grown up just like pretty much every other team guy, imagine, watching Predator, Commando, Navy SEALs, all that. So I knew I wanted to be a commando of some sort, but I had no idea what that entailed. What I saw in the movies or read in the books. So I was like, yeah, I want to be a SEAL. And of course, he was like, no one makes that. That's the hardest training. But yeah, we'll sign you up for that. I mean, there was no contract. I went to boot camp and got told that I wasn't going to BUD/S, that I would be going to Corps school to be a medic. And then from there, I had two choices, either to go to the fleet or go to the Marine Corps. And of course, I chose the Marine Corps. And I spent my 4 years there, which was phenomenal. I wouldn't give that time back for anything. That the Marines are a very loyal bunch, and I became really, really close with the platoon I had. I did my first platoon with a regular grunt unit, and I was going to screen to go to recon. Took the screener, passed it, and I was on my way over there, and a recon Marine stopped me and was like, why do you want to come over here? I was like, well, I want to go to be a SEAL eventually. And he was like, then don't come over here because you won't leave. So I was like, well, what's the next best thing, I can do to challenge myself? And they said, try out for State Platoon, which is the sniper platoon in the battalion. That was about a month and a half long screening process where they just, trained us but beat us every day to make sure we were worthy of being in the platoon. I forget, it was like 30 of us started, and they took 6 of us into the platoon. And from there, I was the medic, the corpsman. So I was going to be just the corpsman for that platoon, but one of the guys became an instructor at the schoolhouse, and he pretty much finagled a deal. He's like, you can come to the schoolhouse and go through the course. You're just not going to get credit. And he knew I wanted to be a SEAL, so he's like, this will help you, get a leg up. And I wanted to go. So I went and ended up doing fairly well. And I think enough people got dropped that they were like, you're a student. And I just finished out that course. At the end, I didn't get, I went to the graduation but didn't get a certificate, but they pulled me out back and gave me a hog's tooth, and that meant more to me than anything. And so I stayed in that platoon as a sniper / corpsman. And I also went to McQuist, became a Marine Combat Water Survival Instructor. So I was the only McQuist in the battalion. So I was in charge of swim qualling every Marine, which was hard to do, but I was glad I did it. That school's no joke either. You better be comfortable in the water when you go through there. And so when I came out of that school, I was like a fish. I was ready to go. And of course, during that whole time, 9/11 had kicked off, and we deployed out, and we ended up going into Mosul, and then we also ended up going into Liberia or Monrovia when all that was going down. Came back from that deployment, and I went right to BUD/S. I barely went. I had taken the screener for BUD/S probably like 10 times and passed it, but they kept refusing me orders, and I was pretty much at my wit's end. I was going to get out. I was thinking about getting out because I was frustrated, but one chief, he checked in and pretty much was going through the roster and saw I had screened 10 times, and I was never in the BAS, the Battalion Aid Station, which is where most corpsmen work. I was always out in the field with the guys. So he came out and found me and was like, do you want to go still? And I'm like, yep. And he marched me down to personnel, got me orders right there, which, thank God. That guy passed away. That chief passed away about 5 months ago. But if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been able to go. But ended up, going to BUD/S, class 251. And then got rolled in second phase for pool comp, and then finished out with 252. From there, obviously go to SQT, SEAL qualification training. And then I went to 18 Delta because I was already a corpsman, so it was automatic. I was going to 18 Delta to go to Special Operations Medical School. That was about 8 months. And once that was finished, I went and checked into Team 1. At Team 1, I checked into Delta Platoon. And I showed up, even though I already had combat experience. I still showed up, kept my mouth shut and eyes open. I just was like, these guys, I looked up to them right away. They were SEALs. They'd already been around. And so I just tried to learn as much as possible. I had probably the most phenomenal dudes in my platoon, counting Aaron Vaughn, Brad Kavner, and then, of course, Dan Luna. We were all in one troop, but it felt like one platoon because everybody got along.
And so that was your first troop in the SEAL teams with those guys who, in being quiet, despite having combat experience, is usually a safe bet.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in the SEAL teams. I'd come over as a recon Marine, just be quiet.
Remain humble.
Remain humble. So did you ever have a chance, and thank God for good leaders that step up and albeit a small gesture, getting you the orders. Did you ever have a chance to go back and thank them?
I tried. When I was at 18 Delta, I actually drove up to Lejeune to try and find them, and I couldn't find him anywhere. I completely lost contact with him. So no, unfortunately, no. The only reason is one of the staff sergeants that was in my platoon had reached out to me and was like, hey, he passed. Just to let you know, and that's how I knew.
I'm sure he knew. So I wanted McQuest, that, we used to call that three weeks of drowning.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a no joke school.
The Marine Corps, even with the combatant dive course, which I went through as a recon Marine, I thought that was much more difficult than second phase of MUDs.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not trying to compare it. It was run differently. It was still part of a screening process within that community. But so what years did you go to sniper school?
2001.
2001? Mm-hmm. We were on the West Coast, East Coast?
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. No, 2002.
2002.
Yeah. On the East Coast, it's now where MARSOC is, but it's at Stone Bay. But that used to be sniper school, and they had all the ranges out there.
And how did you do in sniper school?
I did really well. I was trained up, a year prior in the platoon. And that's the experience I had. Like the platoon I had then, they were so focused on mastering their skill craft. I mean, we never took a day off of training. If we were back at the command, we went out, drove out to the fields, and stalked. So there was never days off. And so by the time I went to sniper school, I was pretty much dialed in. So, I mean, the first part of sniper school is all academics, and everything is verbatim. You have to answer everything to the T, like what's the definition of a Marine Corps Scout sniper? And I'm pretty sure I still know it to this day. It's like a Marine highly skilled in field craft and marksmanship who delivers long-range precision fire from select targets from concealed positions in support of combat operations.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yep. And so I knew I had all that ingrained in me. So that first part went really well. Land nav was tough because it was through the swamps, but I managed to get through that. And then the hardest thing I had trouble with was stalking. I made it just on my last stalk. Scored a perfect. I needed to score perfect, and I did. And then the FTXs were no joke. That was the last week. It's a bunch of missions that you got to do, and they give you one MRE for the whole week, and you are humping around 100-something pound ruck for clicks and clicks and clicks trying to get to your next objective. I came out of there weighing like 140 pounds, but it was awesome. That school was no joke, and I was just grateful. The whole time I was grateful that I got to attend, especially as just like a Navy corpsman, because the Marines hold that school up in such high regard. Every day I was just grateful to be there.
That was one of the toughest schools I've ever been through. And
did you go to
in '99, first Mardiv on the West Coast, Camp Margarita. Funny, it's how things changed. A lot of our instructors had gotten a kill or two in Somalia. Yeah. And so we looked up to them because this is 99. That was the last engagement. It's rare that you meet any Marines that had seen combat or even killed an enemy combatant. So we listened to them intently, but funny enough, it was my last stalk. And it was a kid from Montana, a Marine from Montana, who had already passed the stalking phase that helped me set up and basically sacrificed himself.
Oh, yeah.
Now, did that transition to the SEALs? Did they recognize that? And
they did. So I checked into Team 1, and I didn't think it was going to transition because I didn't have a certificate, but my OIC was going through my record, and the senior enlisted at the schoolhouse wrote a letter for me saying I had gone through everything, passed everything. So he looked at it. They might have called back to the schoolhouse, and they were like, "It's good to go. You're a sniper." So that was pretty awesome. So just checking into your first platoon, already being sniper qualified and medic qualified was pretty sick.
When I checked into Team 3, one of the first people I met was a guy named Jason Gardner. And, for the people that follow Jason, he's got the sleeve tattoos down to the wrists. And, I thought the hazing was coming. And he's yelling me, because most of Team 3 was deployed at the time. He's yelling at me down the long spine of Team 3. And I'm like, oh, crap, here it comes, dude. And he starts running, and I'm like, oh, wow, okay, this guy's going to lay into me. And he's like, hey, I heard you were a Marine sniper. My dad was a Marine. And next thing you know, he'd called down to the Army, and I was checking out a suite of guns. I did not think that qual was going to be recognized, but it surely was.
I actually had a funny story.
Yeah.
So they gave me a suite, and our first trip was out to Shaw's. So I had just checked into Team 1, and I think less than a week later, we were out going to Shaw's to do our first CQC trip. And we were supposed to go sight in our rifles that morning. They gave us like a half hour. And so I come out, I have my rifles, and they were going to go drive down to the range, and they pull up, and somebody was driving the car, Dan Luna, and
no name dropping, but yeah, we'll drop it anyways.
He rolls down the window, and he's like, "What's your name?" And I was like, "Oh, it's Eddie," and he's like, "Huh." And I had the 2 rifles, and he's like, I go to put him in the back, and he just takes off. And so I ran down to the range with both my rifles.
That was definitely
welcome.
Yes.
Welcome to the troop. But that's the stuff I expected, though. I was like, I'm going to prove myself and make sure I earn my keep here.
That pretty much summarizes Dan perfectly. That's good. This is Mike Sorelli. You're listening to Truth and Tribe. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Mike Sorelli. I'm the host of Truth and Tribe. We are with Eddie Gallagher. Eddie, before we get to your time in the SEAL teams, I want to circle back to your time in the Marine Corps. I often say, and I believe this, man, that 2 organizations in our nation have written the book on leadership. They're called the U.S. Army and the U.S. Marine Corps.
Yep.
And those books continue to evolve as they should. What were the things that you took from the Marine Corps that you believe led to success in the SEAL teams?
Well, for one, work ethic. The being in the Marines, like when I showed up to Buds, it wasn't any kind of shock to me. I mean, for 4 years in the Marines, you got up at 5 a.m. for morning PT, you did formation, and then pretty much your schedule was dictated, but it was very, regimented. The amount of discipline that the Marines have, just in the way they treat their subordinates or the rank above them, everything is, corporal, lance corporal, sergeant. I mean, they are locked on at all times. And I don't know how it is now, but I know back then if you messed that up, you were paying the man big time. So that type of leadership definitely was ingrained in me to respect the rank above me. And then just like I talked about before, getting over to the sniper platoon and just seeing those guys, they made it over there. They were snipers, but that every day they went out and trained to get better at their craft. And it was because they were like, we're not as good as we should be. And I mean, these guys were phenomenal dudes, like phenomenal snipers, but it's because they trained all the time. And that definitely, had an impact on me. I was like, this is dedication. The dedication they put to their skill craft was amazing, and that trickled down to me. And then also with the physical, the PT, that was like huge. So yeah, I think that I definitely felt like I had an upper hand going to Buds after just with the 4 years I did with the Marines, more so than a kid coming from boot camp or somebody from the fleet.
Mm. Yeah. The one thing that you mentioned, the discipline, and discipline will set you free. Mm-hmm. I believe that's the one thing I learned from the Marine Corps as well. I mean, the perfect example of that, dude, is, I graduated. I was not a great high school student. I was a little unruly, like you as well. I tried to, in fact, I didn't graduate with my senior class. I had to go back during the summer, and I did a short stint in college, and then joined the Marine Corps because I had Metaforce Recon Marine, but finished high school with a 2.9. The Marine Corps sent me back to school less than 3 years after being in the fleet, and I graduated with a 3.7. I assure you I didn't get smarter over those 3 years, but I learned about discipline, commitment, honor, and courage. Before we get further into your SEAL career, I know you and I have talked about your first platoon chief, and not necessarily, that we need to name him. And he was influential or formative in your development as a leader.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little about the things that you just respected that he did and why the guys respected him so much?
Sure. So like he was a no bullshit type of guy. He pretty much set his expectations out for the guys right off the bat. And if you did not meet those expectations, he was going to let you know. He was definitely not shy about calling people out. Didn't matter with the OIC or us. He was tactically savvy, but he's super, super aggressive. Just was all about like we're going to get after it. I mean, that was his mentality. And then because I guess his prior deployment, he had worked with the Marines. I think he took on some of that character from the Marines. I mean, he even had us blousing our boots, and as team guys, that doesn't fly. But we did it anyways because we respected him and we listened to what he said. And so when we got on deployment, his attitude on deployment, I mean, he was just looking for work all the time. There was never like a day where he's like, oh, we're going to take a break, even though that was sort of forced on us a couple times, but he was always looking for work more than anybody. Well, him and Aaron Vaughn was a second or third platoon at the time, but I mean, just that being in that environment and being around that kind of aggressiveness and just forward leaning, that rubbed off on, I think, not just on me and the whole platoon. And I always say, like, after being in the teams a while, you can tell someone's character from their first platoon. I think the first platoon chief or the first platoon is like the most influential platoon on somebody, especially as a new guy, and that's pretty much how it's going to base your rest of your career off of.
Either for the good or for the bad.
Yes, yeah, and it can go both ways.
The thing, I think everyone that comes out of any special operations assessment and selection, like, they have potential. They've proven, and quite frankly, special operations has the longest vetting or behavioral interview process of any job in the world.
Yeah.
But it is the mentors they receive after they check into the respective special forces groups or SEAL teams that
forms them.
Yeah. But was that sort of mentality pretty standard for SEAL Team 1, which I think we used to nickname it Stalingrad?
Yep, no fun one.
No fun one.
Stalingrad one. Yeah, I would think so. I don't know how it was in the other platoons because I was a new guy and just focused on trying to remain a good new guy in my platoon. But I think, as a team all around, that was pretty much the general culture. It was, uniform inspection. You had to look squared away, even though I think we got away with a lot of stuff. But it was good though. It was like regimented, which is what I was used to in the Marine Corps. So it was nothing really new. I mean, if anything, it was a little bit more lax than the Marine Corps, but it was still regimented.
For the SEAL teams.
Yeah, for the SEAL teams.
And no fun one because you guys just work, train.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's get further in. You do a few platoons at SEAL Team 1. Let's talk about the rest of your career. Of course, leading up to 2017.
I did the first platoon at 1, went to Iraq, and then went to Afghanistan. And then when I came back, I tried to do a third, but they were like, you need to go take a break. So I ended up going to become a first phase instructor, which was probably one of the better stations I had. I went kicking and screaming, but when I got there, it was definitely a good learning environment for me, just because you are the first SEAL that these students see when they come in, and so you should look the part, be the part. They're looking at every little movement that you make, so you really have to stay locked on there and be really wary of how you're acting, which some instructors and the students can tell, which instructors are sort of, not legit, and then which instructors are. But that, just the ability to mentor students as well. And I really didn't see like the fruits of that labor until, years down the road when guys would come up and be like, hey, I really respected you as an instructor, that you really like led by example, which that's more fulfilling to me than anything, that these guys, were willing to, listen to me or like listen to my mentorship. It was good. So I did about a year and a half there, and then I tried to screen, went out there, and that's where we met. And I got dropped during the CQC portion, which is near the beginning. Came back, I screened a week later to try and go back. They told me I would have to wait a year, and I was pretty impatient. I was like, no, I want to go back to combat. So Team 7 was going to Afghanistan, and they had just lost a medic due to a bar fight or something. So I swooped on that chance, got in that platoon, and ended up going back to Afghanistan with Team 7. And then from there, my career just started sort of progressing. I came back, got made the LPO for the next platoon. I still had intentions of screening the whole time. I wanted to get back over there. That was my goal. But then once after the LPO platoon, I picked up chief, and I was pretty much told, hey,
too senior,
you can't go. So they gave me a platoon chief right away. And so I took over Alpha Platoon, and that was the Missoula deployment that we ended up going on.
So you were always trying to put yourself in a position to do work.
Always.
As your first chief said. I mean, you screened. Hey, dude. For a lot of people, that doesn't work out the first time. They come back, but you had already been on a trajectory to take a platoon chief.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that brings us. Let's touch a little, because I've heard you on previous podcasts. You took over a platoon that was not exactly performing to standard due to substandard leadership.
No. Yeah.
Were you specifically selected? They're like, hey, put Eddie in charge of
Yes.
this platoon because of your past.
That's what I was told. So the Master Chief had called me in that prior deployment and said, hey, I'm going to give you Alpha Platoon. And they, I forget what he said about him. It wasn't good, but he said, they didn't do so hot last time. So I want you to take that platoon over. And they gave me a very strong OIC as well, which we got very lucky getting paired together. The OIC, I was his proctor in Buds.
No kidding.
Yeah. Just phenomenal guy. We took over Alpha Platoon, and, I came in, I wouldn't say hot and heavy, but I came in with my expectations, and I told them that we were going to be the number one platoon at the team, that we were going to do nothing but train and get ready to go back to Iraq. I'd been following what was going on. One of my best friends was over there deployed at the time, and just following what was going on, I knew our timing was lining up, that we were going to be able to clear Mosul if it was going to happen. So that I set my sights on that, and I became very, very target fixated on it, which is a pro and a con. I definitely, that's what I wanted. And I think I rubbed some people the wrong way, just because, they brought us in as a troop at first, and the SEA gave us, speech to the chiefs and was like, hey, we're one troop, we're here to help each other out, which is right, and he was like, it doesn't matter who's going where, we all need to perform. And so I just raised my hand. I was like, I just want to say something. I was like, I plan on being the best platoon here. I plan on crushing both you guys, in workup, fair and square. And there's going to be no behind the door backstabbing or anything. I'm just going to outperform. That definitely rubbed some of the other leadership the wrong way, but that was my mentality. I wanted my platoon to be the best. So we started off, and we did CQC and post assault procedures. The basics every day. I would say 3 days a week. And it was monotonous, but that's
usually training is.
Yep.
Yeah.
And as long as you master the basics, everything else will fall into place. And that, I didn't know it at the time, but there was a couple guys that were, griping about it. But either way, it paid off. We went to ULT. First block was assaults, and our platoon was locked on. Trade Ed even was like, "You guys look like this is your last block of training instead of your first. You guys showed up prepared. You guys already know everything, your SOPs. There was really no working out any kinks because we had put in the work prior, which was awesome. That was the point of doing all that training. So workup went really well for us. We ended up getting, the top rated platoon out of workup, and then getting to choose where we wanted to go, which was Mosul, Iraq.
So do you think you brought in that SEAL Team 1 mentality to a different culture, and that just wasn't well received?
Oh yeah, that was definitely part of it. That was my third platoon at 7, and I still had some of that Team 1 ingrained in me for sure. Team 7 was a lot more lax, and which is not a bad thing, I'm saying, but it was just a different environment, not as intense, I guess, as Team 1 was. So I definitely still had some of that ingrained in me.
Yeah. And I know for the listeners, they probably think holistically, hey, the SEAL teams just have one culture. No organization has one culture. There's these like micro cultures within each of the SEAL teams, and then each of the troops are different. Each platoon within those troops has a different culture. Micro tribes, as you can.
Yes.
So the performance of the platoon, I mean, you guys were starting to stand out. You'd gone from, previous to you taking the platoon chief position, the platoon was underperforming, and then slowly through workup, are you guys receiving recognition?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, we were getting all sorts of good write-ups from Trade Ed. I mean, the Master Chief, every once in a while would be like, hey, you guys are crushing it. Keep going. So it was definitely known that the platoon was doing really well. And it wasn't, I'm not saying that's due to my leadership either. I mean, the guys, even though what these guys did, they were performing. I mean, they were doing exactly what they should be doing. So it was a group effort, and why we got number one.
In one of your previous podcasts, I think it was Mic Drop, you talked about how your LPO came to you and said, hey, you guys had just done a great evolution in land warfare. And he recommended that, hey, I think, you should probably recognize the guys.
Yep.
Now, going back to your days at Team One, your first, platoon chief, was he not a guy, he gave you the expectations? If you met the expectations, did you not get a pat on the back?
No. The only way you were talked to is if you did something wrong. If you met the expectations or exceeded them, then you were doing your job as a Navy SEAL. And that was the mentality. Like, that's what you're supposed to be doing.
And looking back, do you think just given, one, it's a different generation of SEALs.
Yep.
Do you think you should have engaged?
Yeah, I've definitely thought about that moment a lot. I think maybe if I did give them that recognition, then it might have changed the vibe, I guess, a little bit. I mean, going back now, I probably would have been like, yeah, you guys are doing a good job, keep it up. But that was not the way I was raised in the teams. If you were doing a good job, then that's what was expected of you. And then if you did an exceptional job, then you were probably going to get awarded, in front of the command. But either that, there was no, hey, you're doing a great job. And, there's different trains of thought. And I'm not saying either one is right, but, sometimes, the two most dangerous words are good job, because then people just stop trying to be better. They're like, oh, and I'm good. And you sort of see them flatline. But then on the other hand, people excel by being told they're doing a good job or getting compliments.
Yeah. Do you personally thrive off recognition or accolades?
No. I mean, I don't. I thrive off of my peer eval.
Yeah.
I thrive off of that. The guys want me to be with them. If I'm one of the guys like, no, we want him coming with us, then I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, dude, I tend to agree, man. Recognition, it makes me sort of cringe.
Yes.
That's just me. And maybe that was the way I was raised by my old man as well, and my predecessors in the military. Attaboys, they have a place.
Yeah, they definitely do. I think that, guys do need to get recognized for doing extraordinary things, but that's extraordinary. If you're doing the job, then, I mean, to me, that should be enough. Like, I was thankful enough that I was a SEAL, that I got to do this job. It was a privilege. So I was, every day, and this is how I lived, was I was constantly trying to prove myself every day to be worthy of standing next to the guys next to me.
You talked about credibility, which, I mean, the currency in special operations is your credibility. That's all you have, your reputation and your credibility. As I was doing research and prepping for this podcast, of course, I called dudes that had worked with you that I knew. Mm-hmm. And the best accolade I think you can get in the SEAL teams is when somebody says, he's a good dude. And they're very emphatic about the good, like the good dude. And I got that. I mean, on the flip side, there were some people that were like, just don't give him the time of day.
Yep. That's the environment that I'm in right now.
Yeah. And albeit we said it earlier, it shouldn't slow your role for what you do going forward. So you guys have performed. You're one of the top platoons of SEAL Team 7. do you get specifically selected to go to Mosul or to that AO, area of operation?
Yeah, so it was our platoon and then one other platoon from another troop, is Gulf, and we fell under MARSOC. So we were going to be attached to MARSOC and pretty much working for them the whole deployment. We broke off from Team 7. So yeah, we got selected to go there, which was phenomenal. I actually knew, so it was Lieutenant Colonel Christian at the time. He was actually, I think, an XO at 1-8 when I was there as a new guy. And I went up to the MARSOC command up in Pendleton to sort of do a meet and greet, and he remembered me right away. He was like, dude, I remember you always working out, training to be a SEAL. He's like, that's awesome that you made it. We had a very good relationship. He was also very aggressive, very forward-leaning, and so it really worked out on that deployment. Just the attitude and the way we did business, and I think another thing that needs to be said is when we did deploy, that's when Trump took office. Mm-hmm. We pretty much, I think, deployed maybe 3 weeks after he took office, mm-hmm. and right before we went, I think Mattis was the SecDef, so he came out and pretty much the statement is the gloves are off, get it done. He came out, he's like, annihilate them. And so that was, when we landed, that was the attitude. It was get out there and do it. Now, it was a very big learning curve for me because I had never done a AAA mission. We were there to advise, assist, and accompany. I'd worked with the Afghan commandos before going out with them, but this was completely different. We were going to clear this massive city, and we worked with Emergency Response Division, which was the Iraqi partner force that we had, and they weren't vetted. I think, MARSOC was able to partner up with them so we could get out there and get some work, but we were also told to keep eyes in the back of our heads the whole time. There's a lot of Iranian influence in that partner force, but honestly, they were probably one of the most motivated partner forces that I've worked with. I mean, they were, out there every day, just trying to clear that city, and they took a lot of casualties on a daily basis. But the first, when we first went out, the rule was we had to stay 800 meters behind the front line, and we just were supposed to advise, assist, and accompany from there, which really meant flying the drone and then launching mortars if we saw targets. But the problem was when we picked a spot, ISIS had drones of their own, so they would fly them over us, and the next thing you know, we were taking mortars all day, and they were landing, 10 to 15 meters from us all around, so then we would have to drive back to the FOB. We went through about 2 weeks of that, really not gaining any ground, and I talked, me and my OIC lived together, and we talked, and I was like, we need to go on the offensive here. We're not a defensive force. We need to start doing some things here to affect the battlefield. So we started going out and, doing the same thing, setting up a location to launch the Puma and the mortar, but then I would go out and we get a recce team and recce sniper OP and go. Once we found a good spot that we had good observation of everything, we would bring Gustavs, javelin, sniper rifles, and just stay up there all day and help out the partner force. And that's what really got the partner force moving. I remember the first time we launched a javelin, we were taking fire. The partner force was as well, and I was like, "That's it." Like the OIC wasn't comfortable launching those weapons just yet. I mean, which rightly so. He wanted to give it some couple of weeks and get comfortable, but we were a couple weeks in at that point. And I was like, "We're doing this." Went and launched the javelin, and the Iraqis cheered and just started pushing forward. And that's when I realized, like, this is what they want. They need to push every once in a while. So we really did our best to move up forward, not to the front line, but we got up to where we could get a good observation and start affecting the battle space for them that way. And I honestly believe because of that, that's how they cleared Mosul so quickly.
So Eddie, I do want to step back. So you guys deployed January of 2017, and we lost, I know, a good buddy of yours and a mutual friend of ours, Ryan Owens.
Yep. Yeah. So that, we got notified that he was killed right when we were getting into country. I think one of my buddies had texted me and told me that it had happened. Ryan was at Team 1 when I checked in there. He was part of the crew, which, the good old boy crew. And yeah, he was a huge personality, just someone that you looked up to, or like, you were just like, I want to be around this guy. He makes you laugh, but he was also a very good operator. And so, I mean, that was devastating for the whole community. I mean, that losing a guy like that, and then with that much experience, and that's, we get into this later on, but you lose so many friends. It just sort of becomes, you're sort of numb to it. You're like, you feel horrible about it, but then you're like, I have a job to do, and I have to stay focused on that.
You compartmentalize.
Yeah,
you push it
I
down.
definitely pushed it down, like I did a lot of the other deaths, and just like this is a product of the job. I mean, this can happen, and
we can talk about that now since we're out, and I did the same thing. I think most of the SEALs we know do the same thing, but that pot eventually boils over, especially as you retire. Hey, one of the things I want the listeners to understand, and quite frankly, I never understood this. You do raids in Iraq during the Iraqi war, and you'd come across propaganda or videos of Al-Qaeda torturing Iraqi citizens, and those videos don't get released. I Googled atrocities in Mosul, and the list between 2014, and I was amongst some of the first on the ground when the ISIS thing kicked off. I was with a Army Tier 1 unit as an exchange troop commander. But from 2014 to 2017, the list of atrocities is disgusting.
That whole place was an atrocity. Yeah.
Just give us a setting of what ISIS was doing inside of Mosul, what those people, the good citizens of Mosul who just want peace and prosperity for their families, what were they going through? And how did this affect the Iraqi troops trying to take that back?
Well, the ISIS was definitely torturing and killing civilians, Iraqi civilians, the whole time we were there. We watched multiple times, so we would be clearing, and ISIS, there'd be like a field in front of us, and they'd be maybe 800 meters away, and then they would send hordes of women and kids sprinting towards us in the field, and then mow them down in front of us, trying to draw us out, and then also draw the Iraqi partner forces out. Another thing they would do is they would chain the women and children to the basements of buildings, and then put a silhouette on top of the building of a person holding a gun. So then we would think that was someone to bomb, and we'd bomb the building, and they'd use that as propaganda. We ran across, one time I was looking for a spot, and there was it was almost like a playground, and there was heads on the spikes of the fence. There's only like two, but the Iraqis were, huddled around trying to get them off. But I mean, it's just stuff like that. It was on a daily basis. That place, there was no rules. And then what that did with the Iraqi partner force is they didn't follow any rules either. They were very angry, and we we lived with the partner force, and so we lived in this little hut or a house, and they lived in a hut that was attached to our house, which they used as their prisoner holding facility. And so we would go to sleep every night listening to them get raped or tortured, and it was just, that was the environment that we were in. Looking back now on it, it's pretty crazy, but at the time, it was, like I said, it was target fixated. It's like, this is a job we have to get done. But I do think those atrocities that we saw, and then like just going up to find OPs, we would have to climb over dead bodies. They would just pile the dead bodies up against doorways or places, avenues of approach. So we would have to climb over them to get to other areas, and they were either burned up or just laying there. And I think that took a toll on some of the guys for sure. And I don't blame, I'm not saying it's a weak thing, because it took a toll, because it was pretty atrocious what was going on. But I definitely think that had a factor on some of the guys in the platoon as well.
Did it have a factor on you?
No. Nope.
You were just that numb.
I mean, I was like, this is the environment that we're in. I mean, I don't think I wanted to dwell on it. That watching those women and kids get mowed down. Now if I talk about it, I'll get choked up, just because it's, the visions I see, of what I saw. But then we were doing a job, and it was a hellacious place to be. But that was the task we were given, was to get clear Mosul.
Dude, as a father, as you're watching all this, that's got to be weighing in your mind. I know for me, when we'd raid a house where the bad guy had his family there, and to see the kids crying, it just tore me apart.
Yeah, it definitely, as a father, I mean, I was just thankful that my kids live in America, that we're Americans. That's all I can think of. But, on previous deployments, there's been stuff that happened where we've had, I'm a medic, I've treated kids that have died in my arms. And that, I think that happened like 3 or 4 times on my Afghan deployments. And it's hard, but you end up realizing that these people live in a different culture. They don't look at it the same way we do, which is also very hard to watch, but it's a different country and a different way of life. They have different values than us.
I think that's an understatement.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys are, MARSOC's recognizing you for doing good work up towards the front.
Yep.
You've got a great relationship with you're supporting them. And as I've heard you talk about this on other podcasts, and as you describe it, to me, it's you have the basic or pretty ordinary grumblings from some of the people within the
we were living in very shitty conditions. The house that we were living in was super tiny. The whole platoon, the first couple of weeks I had the whole platoon there, we were sleeping on top of each other. Like my OIC's feet would be on my head, sleeping. And then we decided to break the platoon up, send up half the platoon back to Erbil to rest and refit for a week, and then they would rotate out the other guys. So it was a week on, week off. And I also wanted to minimize the footprint every time we went out. The first couple times we went out with the whole platoon, and that's 5 MAT-Vs, which is a huge target for mortars. So I decided to break the platoon down to minimize our footprint out there. And it ended up, I thought it was a good deal. I brought it up to the platoon. I honestly thought I was going to get a lot of kickback, because thinking guys weren't going to be able to go out every day, but no one said a word. They're like, okay. So we ended up doing that. And I think that ended up being one of the factors as well as to why this whole thing got out of control. And one of the guys admitted it to me. He's like, hey, we come back to this house and we get a hate circle going about whatever, and they don't even know what they're complaining about. They're just complaining to complain. But a lot of it was focused on leadership. And it just got out of control, I think, for them every time they went back. And they'd bring that attitude back when they, were going to cycle out with half the platoon. It was only one section of that platoon that was like that. The other one was fine. I had no issues with. But it was the right decision to do that. That way guys weren't getting burned out, because myself and the OIC and the Marine that was attached to us, we used to went out every day, and we were smoked by the end of that deployment.
And the Marine was
he was a SIGINT.
From MARSOC?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
He was attached to the Raiders.
And so you, the OIC, and the MARSOC support operator were on every single mission?
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
That's, as a leader, that's what you have to be out there with them.
Of course.
But yeah, so we went on. I mean, it was a very busy deployment. There was, we would, the only days off we would have is if a cloud cover came in and we could not get ISR. But other than that, we were going out any day that we could. And, one of the missteps I think I made is if we did have a break, like a chance, if they were like, hey, you guys don't have to go out today, my OIC and I were like, no, we're going out. We're going out as much as we can. And the attitude that I had towards it, as well as my OIC, was, this deployment is few and far between what we're doing right now, and we want to take advantage of it, get as much experience and work in as possible. And I also wanted to get the newer guys in my platoon as much experience as possible, because they're the ones that are going to be passing on that experience. All of us older guys will be out in 5 to 10 years, and these guys will remain. So I got them behind the gun as much as possible, which wasn't looked well upon by some of the older guys either. I think they came from a culture where new guys don't do anything. You have to, earn your right to go shoot the gun, where my philosophy was like, these guys should be on the gun getting the experience. So I'd bring them up and with me to sniper OPs and let them get work. And I was told after that these older guys were going to the new guys saying, Chief shouldn't be doing this. He's just trying to get one of you killed. Like, putting that kind of stuff in their head, which is ridiculous. But I still stand by that, getting the new guys experience.
That's interesting, because new guys in all the organizations that I worked with in the military were usually some of the top performers on their first deployment.
Yeah, they have the best attitude out of anybody.
Absolutely. And sometimes not. They didn't have bad habits. So you've got some basic grumblings.
Yep.
No one's coming to you. You guys redeploy home. You're rated the #1 platoon chief, which is not easy amongst, 6 platoons?
No, 9 at the time.
9 platoons at SEAL Team 7.
Yep.
You're the #1 platoon chief. You guys had the most effects on the battlefield. You are submitted for a Silver Star. Because it's time, you leave SEAL Team 7, move over to the training detachment.
Yep.
To lead SAUC.
Yep, to take over as the senior enlisted advisor for SAUC.
And teach the SEAL teams that are in the rotation, prepare them for urban combat. Is that correct?
Exactly, yeah. Bring my experience from this previous deployment, because that was the most up-to-date, and try and implement that in the training at SAUC.
Let's step back a little further, too. You were the Sailor of the Year at one point in your career for SEAL Team or all of the West Coast.
Yep.
For all the West Coast?
All the West Coast, yeah.
So you're the Group 1 Sailor of the Year as an E6. Of course, you had an incident in 2014 where you tried to avoid a Navy police officer. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I went in, quick story. I went in on a Saturday to pack up for my SR trip. Pulled into the base, and this MP or MA pulled me over. He sat in his car for about 20 minutes, did not come up to my car, so I was getting frustrated. He came up. I was like, why'd you pull me over? He said I didn't have my registration sticker on my license plate. I pulled it out. I was like, it's right here. I just got it registered. I'll throw it on. He's like, nope, I'm writing you a ticket anyways. And then he asked my insurance. I had USAA, so I showed him my phone. He's like, nope, where's your paper insurance? I'm writing you a ticket for that. That's when I was like, pretty much said some words to him. We exchanged. I pretty much just verbally, assaulted him. I was pissed, but nothing other than that. I drove off. He ended up calling the real cops. They came in front of Team 7. The guy pulled me out at gunpoint because the MA had told him that I had tried to run him over, which was completely false.
Yeah.
And from there, ended up getting squashed in the end. That MA got found that he was harassing team guys all over the place.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not uncommon.
Yeah.
That people try to get or use their power against people that they just don't like, which the SEALs are not necessarily liked by everyone in the Navy. I used to, we would have to deal with that as leaders, but I usually just sort of snickered at that type of stuff. I had a great leader whose name I can't mention because he's still active, but one of my best commanding officers, who said, I don't know where the public has lost sight about special operations, is that we're not in the business of raising Boy Scouts. We're in the business of raising the one man through the door. And what I mean by that is the one man is the first man to make entry into an enemy compound in which he's going to either be fired upon or he's going to shoot first and kill the enemy. And so, that takes a toll. That level of performance takes a toll on anyone. And so if, for the audience, these little incidents, while hey, we're supposed to hold ourselves to a high standard, you got to get all the facts before you make judgments.
Exactly. And that's the thing I think is a big misconception as well is, everyone thinks, Navy SEALs or any special operations, I think people think we're robots and they're like, you're supposed to act this way. You're a special operator, but like we're human beings. And if you've been doing this job long enough, it does take, you get tired, you get an emotional toll, and guys will make mistakes. But I think it's good leaders who recognize that, hey, this is a mistake. Yes, you're going to be punished for it.
Yes, we're going to get our pound of flesh.
We're going to get our pound of flesh out of you, but not to where you cannot bounce back. And then, obviously, if you make that same mistake twice, then we have an issue.
I know my last few years in the military, I just didn't want to be messed with by anyone in the military. I just, my bandwidth was short, and I didn't necessarily deal with everything well, but even having to go, because my last tour was in Austin, Texas, having to go to San Antonio to one of the bases, it was hard for me to step on base. I just tried to, stay the gray man, but there was always that one person that would make a comment on the uniform or whatnot. And that sounds wildly immature as I'm talking about that, but it's just after you serve a career of 20 years, I've seen that amongst a lot of SEALs. So you're selected for a coveted billet as the SEA of SAUC.
Yeah.
That's not passed out lightly. Again, that's an indicator of your performance. And then you start to hear things in passing.
I had come back from that deployment. I had heard rumors already from other guys coming up to me saying, hey, some of these guys in your platoon are saying a lot of bad things about you, saying, well, first it was, I was too aggressive, I was too dangerous, my tactics were horrible, and which didn't bother me. I was like, we had a great deployment, and I told the guys, when you're a platoon chief, you can skin the cat the way you want to skin it. It's like I skinned it my way, and I thought we had a pretty successful deployment. But then I started hearing rumblings that I was a thief, and that really pissed me off because I'd never been accused of being a thief before. So I called the whole platoon in and wanted to air it out right there. They really had nothing. I stole a Red Bull out of a fridge 6 months. I mean, it was pretty petty. But I had a talk with them. I said, you guys need to decompress and move on with your careers. This hate you got going is not going to end well. It's not going to do any good for anybody. And then I also, a couple of them, the ones, Dalton Tolbert and DeLay, they were staring me down the whole time, and I was like, or we can go to the fight room, and I'll fight every one of you we can get out that way, which was the old school method, which I was brought up.
But usually that was behind a sand berm.
Yeah, behind
okay.
a berm.
All right.
They didn't have a fight room at that time, which was, but they, everybody declined. And what I didn't know is they went right from that meeting up to the command and said that I had accused us to assault them. I had threatened them. The rumors, kept going. But I ended up, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to pay any attention to this. This will go away. I literally was like, I'm not paying this any mind. I was focused on doing my job as an SEA. And it wasn't until after my first trip at SAUC, I came back and I was pulled out of the office and told that 3 individuals went to Group 1 and went to go see the Commodore. And my prior SEA had stopped them because he worked there, and they told him that they wanted my Silver Star revoked for me not to pick up Senior Chief and to be kicked out of SAUC. And they said that they had a video of me stabbing a prisoner to death, and they would release it to CNN if they did not, pretty much if Group 1 did not meet those demands. So Group 1 met those demands, they told me, they were like, we're going to do this until this, whatever this is, boils over. So they pulled me from SAUC, stuck me in a office with no job. No one would, from that point on, I was being shunned. I went and talked to a trade Master Chief. I tried to talk to him. He wouldn't talk to me about it. In fact, it was more accusatory of what he was saying to me. I just felt at that point, I felt like, what is going on? I felt alone. But
You were effectively put on an island.
Yes. And that island got farther away because then they moved me out to supply. It just kept escalating. Now we're going to send you to supply. Now you're going to go here, move your cage. And I followed the orders every time. I'm like, okay. And because I would ask what was going on, they're like, we don't know, just do it. I'm like, this is what has to be done. So I did that, and it wasn't until June of 2018 I was called in to supply by my XO. He wanted to have a meet and greet with me because we hadn't talked, and he was a SEAL. So I showed up at 07, and he opened his door, and there was 5 NCIS agents in there, and they, showed me their credentials, and ended up handcuffing me and parading me through the supply in front of everybody. They put on a real big scene, I guess, when they showed up. They had cleared. They're like pushing people in offices and just making a scene of it. They told me they were taking me to question me. They took me over to an interrogation room. I sat in there and I was polite to them. I said, hey, I'm not trying to be a dick, but I want my lawyer. I just want to have a lawyer present because that's what I've been told since day one. They're like, oh, sure. And they left and pretty much didn't come back for 7 hours. While I was in there, they already had an assault team that raided my house that was staged for that day. They knew my wife wasn't home, pulled my kids out at gunpoint, and pretty much laid siege to my house, as well as my cages, all my stuff, my vehicle. So I had no clue that was going on. I get let out of the interrogation room, and they took my phone, wouldn't give that back. And so I literally, an MA came, picked me up, took me back to my truck, went home, and that's when I found out my house got raided. My wife and kids were sitting in the living room, and my wife pretty much told me everything that happened, and I was enraged. I didn't believe my kids that these guys put guns in their face, and I had them walk me through exactly what happened at the front door, exactly what each person was doing. And, my kids aren't liars. I was just like, oh, maybe you guys are exaggerating a bit, but they weren't. So I went into the command the next day, requested to talk to the Group 1 Master Chief, which that was a tall order to get, but he finally came over, and all he said to me was, you are not picking up Senior Chief. We are going to suspend it because I had been selected, and that if I had any issues, I should go talk to a chaplain. And that was it. Left me with that. So from there, at that point, I was like, this has gone way too far and off the rails. I was still, at that point, going to stay in, thinking that this was going to blow over. But that was I was like, all right, I'm getting out. This is it. I moved my family to Florida the next week. We bought a house, and my plan was to geobatch until my retirement. NCIS waited till I came back without my family. I went to Intrepid Spirit, or it's a branch off of NICO, to get checked out before I retired. And that's where they came and arrested me there about a week and a half in. The command came and it was my prior SEA and 2 MAs. And they had no answers for anything. I asked why I was being arrested, why am I going to prison, to the brig. They had no clue. They just said that the Admiral Green and, at the time, Commodore Rosenblum had signed off on it, and that was it. So they took me to the brig. I had no clue what was going on. I just knew that I had to remain calm. I was going
Enraged.
nuts, but I knew I got to keep my composure. This will be, this is a mistake. They'll let me out of the brig. And that's when I found out that the system, once you're in that system, they stack all the cards against you, the deck against you, and it's a corrupt system. Once you get thrown in there, you're not getting out. So I was in pretrial confinement for 9 months.
9 months in the brig.
Yeah.
Was there a precedence to raid your house? And 2, was there a precedence to lock you up given in what I'm thinking is like Lieutenant Cowley from the Miley massacre. I think he was on a house arrest.
Yeah. The only precedence they had, if that it can be called precedence, is hearsay. That's it. That's all they were going off of. So the reason they raided my house is they somehow finagled a judge to sign off on it, saying that I was a threat, that I had all sorts of stuff in my house or whatever. So they got that signed off, and then they kept me in prison because one of the accusers was my neighbor. He lived 4 houses down, and he wrote a statement saying that I was stalking him since we got back from deployment, and that I would walk my French bulldogs past his house to threaten him on a daily basis. That him and his family were scared if I was let out, and I had no idea this guy was even involved in anything at the time. I would literally see him and give him a wave or whatever, not thinking anything of it until I saw the letter that he wrote when I was already in prison. So that was their, like, you're not getting out. They give you a hearing when you're in prison. It's called an IRO. It's like 3 days in. It's a formality, but it's whether to determine you belong in prison or not. And they can say anything they want. The prosecutors came in, got up and said that I was everything from a drug mule to I beat my wife. I was a fake Christian. I don't just saying all sorts of stuff, and there's nothing you can say. Like, you have to just sit there and take it. And then all I had was some character witnesses get up and be like, that's not true at all. This is what we know of him. But the judge was like, no, he's staying in here. They used all my qualifications against me to, they'd be like, he's breacher, sniper, this, like, we cannot let him out. He's a danger. So that was pretty devastating to have, like, all of your hard work and your, everything you've given your blood, sweat, and tears for used against you. Now it's a threat. And so that pretty much went on. I got thrown back in general population, and from there you just have to wait for your trial. And so it was just a grind in there, trying to keep your sanity. But thank God, I have a very strong and amazing wife who, once that happened, she stood up and she pretty much was like, this isn't happening. You guys aren't doing this to my husband. She actually at first wrote a letter to the command. I think it was, pretty much it was like attention to or calling the real brotherhood or whatever, and like, this is what's happening to my husband. She laid it all out. She's like, someone can help us. There's nothing anybody could do. So she went on her own and started a organic Instagram page and was just putting out facts on there, and she got a huge following. I had no clue this was not really going on at the time because I was locked up. And it wasn't until I saw her on the news when I was like, oh, this has gotten big. And from there, it just escalated into the shit show that it became.
Yeah. Man, I don't think there's any way other than to describe that this entire thing looked like a clown show for everyone involved, and for the SEALs, for you, and you use two names, Admiral Green and Commodore Rosenblum.
Yep.
Two guys who are revered in the SEAL teams. I worked for Green. I'll only say he's a good man. I saw him struggle in 2006, whether and his troop commanders were getting aggressive, whether that was the right decision to bring the fight to the enemy, and ultimately he backed his troop commanders. I don't know the information he or Rosie saw, but that's what makes this just so contentious.
Big
is
time.
You have two sides of the camp with each saying one thing, and again, I respect people on both sides, man. They're warriors.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel like a lot of the people who made decisions during this time that were against me, like, I respected them beforehand. And I say this to the guys now, like, I still respect those dudes as SEALs and leaders, but they made some very bad decisions during that time as leaders. Yeah. They decided to die on a hill that they shouldn't have been on in the first place. There's no doubt in my mind there's a lot of political influence coming from the top. I mean, the Secretary of the Navy was involved, and in meddling with my case. So I don't know where exactly the word came down, like hang this guy out to dry, like at all costs, but it definitely came from somewhere, because the attitude was, you're going down no matter what. I mean, no matter what evidence came out that was like, hey.
It was damning to you.
Well, if it was damning to me, they were putting it out in
yeah.
the media. But if it was good for me, it was getting swept aside. So it was very frustrating to see the leadership from our community sort of acting the way they were. And I mean, I was devastated by it. I felt it like broke my heart in there, because I was like, this is the community that I love. But, Andrea, I gave me a phone. She on a phone call, and she was like, it was probably one of the most important phone calls I had in there. And she's like, we are all, like, your family is all you have. We are going to fight for you. No one is coming to get you. You need to let the teams go. Like, they're not coming to get you. And so I hung up the phone, went back to my cell, and I got on my hands and knees and prayed out loud to God and told him to take it. I was like, I have no control of the situation. I felt helpless, and I was like, whatever your will is, I have faith that it's going to be the right thing. And I felt the weight of the world lift off my shoulders at that point. I mean, it was still, not the greatest in there, but I could honestly feel his presence the whole time. Helped me have a positive attitude, helped me maintain my sanity. And the other thing that got me through was visitors on the weekend. I had very loyal friends that came and visited me, and I mean, there was times where I didn't want to see anybody.
Yeah.
I'd go into a hole, for the week and just be angry that I was in there. But every time I went and had those visitors, it brought me back to like a positive attitude, and that was a huge, huge light for me.
I don't think anyone will debate that you've got a strong woman in Andrea and a fighter.
Yeah.
And again, not being involved in the situation, but watching from afar, which I was here in Austin, she was front and center fighting for her husband. So I think this is a good place to stop for episode 1. We'll pick up with the remainder of the trial, and then I really want to dive into, like, who is Eddie Gallagher and where do we go from here, what we learned, so that the listeners, the everyday warriors who run into, hopefully, situations that are not as dire and drastic, but still facing their own leadership challenges, can look back on this and say, hey, I remember Eddie Gallagher said this. He learned this. So for those listening, again, Truth and Tribe, I'm your host, Mike Sorelli. We will be back with Eddie Gallagher on part 2 of After Action Review. All right, guys. Thanks.